Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Maintaining Employee Engagement. My name is Philip Smith and I'm the Head of News and Content at Gorkana, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this special webinar. Employee engagement is a subject that's close to our hearts at Gorkana. As with other responsible employers, Gorkana runs induction days, a culture cabinet, which is an employee club of groups, trips and offers, and much, much more. And of course, whilst we're on the subject of talent, I feel duty-bound to remind you all that you can find Gorkana's leading recruitment site and job board at gorkanajobs.co.uk. However, in the webinar today, in particular, we're going to look at how businesses are increasingly turning to their agencies and advisors for more support with employee engagement. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we will hear about solutions and tools that are being developed to help businesses engage with their employees better. The webinar will explore how engagement strategies can be developed, how comms and HR teams have to be aligned, and show how engagement is moving beyond the traditional staff survey. Thinking of PR agencies as employers as well, we'll look at how you can engage with and retain staff in a dynamic and fast-moving sector like PR. We're going to start the webinar in a minute with a presentation from 3 experts at Comms Specialist Portland and Behavioural Psychology Research and Consultancy Innovation Bubble. They're going to talk about how PR agencies help their clients fight the talent war. Look out for an explanation of Portland's Hero tool and what it is doing with clients since it brought the idea to market earlier this year. But after the presentation, we will open up the webinar to a Q&A session. So please send us your questions and help me put our experts on the spot using the tab on the right of your screen. So do send those questions in. I'm delighted to say that today, answering your questions and indeed presenting to us are 3 experts, Katharina, Gillian and Siobhan. Welcome all 3 of you to the webinar. Let me tell you a little bit about our guests before we begin. Katharina is Katharina Wittgens, who is a business psychologist at Innovation Bubble. She specializes in identifying the subconscious and non-rational triggers and drivers of individual and group behavior in organizations and market environments. She has extensive experience in the healthcare sector, including having designed and managed various research projects dealing with stakeholders' decision-making. We also have Portland's HR Director, Gillian Robinson, joining us today. Jill has overall responsibility for Portland's human resources function. She brings HR experience from commercial and not-for-profit organizations, including Mercer Consulting, the Association of British Insurers, and Westpac Banking Corporation. Jill also has an MA in People Management and is an associate member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Siobhan Newmarch. Siobhan is a director of Portland who is an internal communications and change management specialist. She joined Portland from Barclays and has a background in journalism for the BBC before moving into corporate communications. She works across a variety of clients for Portland, including technology companies, transport, health and banking businesses. Katharina, Jill and Siobhan will talk to us in a minute, but before they do, just let me remind you to send in your questions for us and we will make sure there's some time at the end of the presentation to answer them. That's more than enough from me to set the scene. Siobhan, I shall hand over to you now to start the presentation.
Super. Thank you very much, Philip. So we're going to take you through who we are, a bit more background from what Philip said, what we do at Portland, talk you through Hero, our employee engagement tool, really what employee engagement means for culture at companies, and then take some questions from you. So as Philip mentioned, I work at Portland leading the engagement practice, having spent time with Barclays and the BBC, and my role at Portland is to support clients with employee engagement and integrated communications campaign across sectors.
Great. So I'm Jill. I have a background in predominantly professional services. I've got about 15 years experience in HR, full generalist HR. I established Portland's HR function in 2010 and subsequently grown it to a team of 6, and I've been at Portland for about 6 years.
Hi, my name is Katharina. I'm a business psychologist and insights director at Innovation Bubble. I'm helping clients to understand human behaviors, so employees, clients and stakeholder behaviors, and what to do about it especially focusing on non-conscious behavior, the emotional reactions and emotions that play a crucial part in this instance, for example, in engagement, and advising clients what to do about it.
So before we go into the specifics of employment, I know there are people from across the sector, both from other agencies, from government and from big corporates. So just to give you a little bit of background on Portland for anyone who doesn't know, Portland was founded in 2001 by Tim Allen, who worked with Alistair Campbell and in Tony Blair's office. We have offices in London, New York, Washington, Nairobi and Doha, and work with clients across media and across different sectors and political campaigns, as well as internal communications. In terms of Portland's approach to clients, we would apply a bespoke approach depending on the need of clients, and our practices, specialisms and expertise range from reputation management to crisis management, public affairs, leadership communications and employee engagement, really sitting across a suite of channels. And the key with Portland's campaign is that they're fully integrated and work across digital, media, internal and political channels, and they would be driven by great content. In terms of the sectors that we work in, our clients are across technology, education, transport, not-for-profit, retail and leisure, planning and infrastructure, energy, professional services, healthcare, high net worth individuals, litigation, governments and pharmaceuticals. So a real range of clients, and from there you can imagine there are different challenges across the communications sector, both for employees but across the broader suite of communications. So the question which we're asked time and time again by clients and also colleagues across Portland is really, what is employee engagement and why does it matter? So it's a relatively new term in the sense that it's not been around as long as traditional PR. However, it's becoming increasingly important, and it tends to be something that our clients certainly are speaking about at the start of campaigns in terms of what does this mean for employees, how do we communicate this, and that's across whether it's good news, bad news, change management or crisis. There's a real recognition from the start, so that if you're preparing a press release, it's equally important to think about how are you going to communicate this to colleagues. Put simply, the way that we like to describe employee engagement is really the discretionary effort that you put in, the reason that you enjoy your job or that you talk about the place where you work with your friends and family. And why this matters, and really the moment when you see cut through with leadership and chief executives of companies is because it really affects the bottom line. Companies with engagement scores in the top quartile have twice the annual net profit of those in the bottom quartile, and that's because these employees tend to be more loyal, more productive, more creative, and take less sick days. So there's a real impact on the bottom line, and you're getting people going above and beyond because they understand what they're doing. And Jill will come on to this, but there's 87% less likely to leave the organisation, so you don't have the retention problem or the churn problem, which particularly working in PR, as you said, Philip, such a fast-paced environment, to hold on to good people and to keep them at your agency or in-house is incredibly important. As well as it being important to the bottom line, reputation matters to a company internally but equally externally, and increasingly what we're finding is particularly millennials are looking for a variety of factors to join a company, so it's much more than benefits as it would have been in the past. They want to see what's going on and really buy into a vision. And then if we look at what does this mean in reality, the approach that Portland takes is really about that it's about coordinating, not controlling your messages. And by this we mean it's not command and control, and there's no button that the leadership can press and communicate to everyone at the same time. It really is an approach that's tailored to your audience, so much the same as colleagues would do in other sectors of communications. It's really about thinking, what do you want people to know, and the best way to do that. And here we look at keeping people informed, engaged and involved. So informed in terms of knowing what's happened, so the facts about what's going on. Engaged really being caring, so actually it's the hearts and minds piece. And then finally being involved, which can quite often be lost in communications, particularly internal communications, is not communicating to your employees or trying to engage with them for the sake of it, having a real purpose. So some of the most successful internal communications will be around where there's a call to action. So rather than just always talking at people, there's a reason for them to be involved and take action from there. And then again, probably most people on the phone, whether it's in-house or at agency, and again from your personal perspective or working with clients, people tend to measure this in pure employee satisfaction terms. So looking at annual engagement scores, and quite often senior personnel are measured on these, and really it's not as simple as that. In terms of employee engagement, we're looking at the fact that employees are increasingly relying on external sources to get their information. So you can't rely on your intranet or a manager briefing or water cooler gossip. The corporate reputation rests on your employees buying into the vision. There's little point in your CEO talking to the media or your leadership talking to politicians if the people who are working for you don't believe in the vision and aren't bought into it. Thirdly, recruitment is becoming increasingly competitive. Everybody wants to retain the best talent because of the impact that it has on your bottom line, so you need to stand out, and employee engagement is one of the best ways to do that. And I think we all know, if you're going for a job, one of the first things that you'll ask yourself is, do I know anyone who works there, or do I know anyone who knows anyone who works there, and what's it like, what's the culture like, because that's just as important as everything else that comes with a new role. Internally, I think it's a much tougher audience than externally. There's a real demand for authenticity and transparency. I think employees in any organisation are some of the most cynical people you'll have to convince. So I think it's harder to convince your employees to believe a story than it is to sell something into the media. And finally, the convergence of channels, so the blurred lines between internal and external communications. So for example, large corporates may have 60, 70, 80,000 people on LinkedIn following the feed, following the thought leadership, following the CEO, and yet on a daily basis you may have only 200 or 300 people logging onto your intranet. So I think it's really about thinking, targeting the channels and having one message across them. That's the theory. In terms of what this means in reality, I'll hand over to Jill.
Thank you. So one of the key challenges for a fast-growing comms business, as you all know, is keeping hold of our best people. And one of the things that Portland are known for is the quality of our talent. And so being in a business which has had double-digit growth year on year, obviously one of the risks there is cultural drift. And one of the things we're keen to maintain is having people who are sort of truly bought into the business, people who see Portland as a career and not just a job. People, as Siobhan said, are happy to sort of shout about, you know, how great their experience is at Portland, and sort of encourage their friends and family to come and work for us. So one of the things that we take really seriously, first to say, is engagement is high on our people agenda. And the first point here is around not just listening to your employees, but really showing them that you're taking action. And one of the ways we do that is through various forums. So we obviously do the traditional things. We have monthly pulse surveys, we have an annual engagement survey, but we've set up a number of forums at different levels. So one of the forums we have is for our staff who are below account manager level. So they are sort of junior to mid-level staff, and they meet once a month, and they talk about issues which are important to them. Issues varying from sort of training to, you know, new business or marketing, anything which is topical, and, or things that are going on in the business at that point in time. And we take that really seriously. So the data that comes from those meetings goes right up to board level. We consider the information, and then we communicate about what changes we're going to make as a result of the feedback. And you know, we've made changes such as, you know, where our young Portlanders have said they want free breakfast, for example. That's something we've implemented. Things like they said they wanted a newsletter. So we have a newsletter that goes out on Friday called Ping, which is Portland Internal News and Gossip, which is quite fun. And then we have things like Friday night drinks. And then on the more serious side, you know, one of the things as a global business, one of the challenges we have is around integration. So how we can get better at that. And they've come up with ideas on how we can do that and have an exchange program, which we've implemented as well. So that just gives you a flavour of something we do at the sort of junior to mid-level. Looking at a more senior level, we have our board who meet regularly, and a level below board we have a senior leadership group who meet, and they get information which is shared amongst board members, so they know how the company's performing, and it's a real opportunity for them to understand how we're doing as a business and how they played a key part in moving the business forward. And as part of that forum, they come up with suggestions on how we can sort of get better at new business, how we can sort of tweak our marketing, and various things which we move forward. So again, it's just about sort of demonstrating that we're not just, you're not just sort of talking in vain, we're actually listening to you, and these are the things we've delivered as a result. My second point is around leadership. Now, this might be an obvious one, but in a lot of organisations, unfortunately, engagement is seen as a HR thing. So it's, well, that's HR's job, and in fact it isn't. And one of the things that makes it work at Portland is that we have buy-in from the very top. And our MD and founder, he wants to know what's going on. He's got his ear to the ground. He is a strong advocate of engagement. So, you know, he's accessible. So he forms part of our onboarding process. He also has lunches with staff. He wants to hear from the horse's mouth, how is their experience at Portland? So what are the things we need to improve? What are the things you're enjoying? And what are the things we need to do differently? So that's important. And also our leaders need to be role modelling the right sorts of behaviours. And we reinforce our messages through leadership training, through executive coaching, and through the performance management process. So we have a 360 process where we get feedback from people who work closely with our leaders and making sure that they're on track and delivering the right sorts of messages. The next point is about brand values. So something which most organisations have, but not many actually use. Sometimes it tends to be a poster on the wall and not much else. So at Portland we've done a lot of work around our brand values. We had a rebrand last year, and as part of this process we wanted to make sure that our values were being used authentically. And one way we do that is we link it to our performance-related pay. So we say this is really important, and people are measured on it. It gives people at Portland clarity on their development and the direction, and helps people stay engaged. It also provides a framework for our development conversations, and provides consistency and fairness and a clear roadmap of things that we actually value. So this is something which keeps people engaged, because they can see what we value, and when we sit down and talk to people and have performance conversations with people, we say, well, this is where we see your career going, and it's all mapped against our sort of 4 core values, and that's important. My final point is around having culture ambassadors. So these are people in the organisation who live and breathe the values. So they are good role models for what we're trying to achieve, and it's another forum for communication. It means that we're basically addressing local issues more effectively, and so we have ambassadors. And they're people ambassadors, and they work closely with our leadership team and with me on all various people matters, and make sure that engagement stays high on the agenda. I look forward to hearing questions from you at the end.
And I think from Jill's point, I'd be interested to hear people's views about where internal communications or employee engagement sits within organisations or clients that you work with, whether it sits with HR or whether it sits with communications. In terms of employee communication, there's little point in having a fabulous communication strategy without doing some research first. So Portland's approach is firmly grounded in research and really trying to find out what people are thinking before coming to the answers. And so in April this year, Portland launched HERO, which stands for Hear, Engage, React and Optimize. And this is a brand new tool that we've developed working with Katharina and the team at Innovation Bubble that measures employee engagement but also can be used to measure membership engagement. Unlike traditional employee opinion surveys, which could go on and on for what feels like half of a lifetime, with endless questions that you never hear back from, HERO examines the user's unconscious decision making and helps reveal how individuals really feel about an organisation. Practically, its advantages for employees or users are that it's quick, picture-led, feels very modern and fresh. And most importantly, at the end of it, you get a personal readout and a personal measure. And this is based on the idea that nowadays we're so used to doing things and getting something in return that people have the same attitude internally. So again, one of the things that helped us develop HERO and guide the shape of it is the fact that we shouldn't treat people differently if we're trying to communicate with them internally. People have the same drivers and motivators as they do in the external world. In terms of the science behind HERO, I will hand over to Katharina to explain more.
Yes, hello everyone. So how HERO was developed is, as Siobhan rightly alluded to already, is that traditional questionnaires and surveys always inherit the biases that you get answers that don't really reveal what people think and feel, and they give answers that managers want to hear, that the company wants to hear, that look good, that sound good in their ears because they would like to answer in a positive way, but actually they feel negative. And we were thinking together with Portland what we can develop in order to circumvent all these biases inherent in traditional questionnaires and to really tap into more non-conscious responses. How can we obtain non-conscious feelings, non-conscious thinking? And the reason why we focus so much on the non-conscious is that from behavioral sciences and decades of psychological research, but also from Nobel Prize research, just mentioning Daniel Kahneman, who did a lot of research on this, is that 95% of human behavior is driven by the non-conscious. So people are actually unaware of why they behave the way they do. You probably all had the situation before where you felt in a certain way, but you couldn't really figure out in this particular moment why you felt this way. So this gives you an indication or an example of non-consciously we digest and we make a lot of decisions that our conscious part or our awareness is actually not aware of. So we wanted to develop a tool that captures exactly that. We wanted to find out how do people, employees, really feel and think about the organization they are working at. in order to then create engagement plans and strategies that are based on a more profound research finding rather than just relying on what people say, which just covers the 5% and ultimately is not really reliable. And that's why so often engagement programs fail because they are reliant on just what people are telling. So how was HERO developed? Siobhan said already, it's a picture-based tool. So when we use pictures, we are circumventing more rational responses, and people are able to actually give gut-and responses, instant and emotional responses in a very quick manner, which word-based traditional questionnaires are unable to capture. And this then allows us to capture non-conscious decision-making, non-conscious responses. As you can probably imagine, pictures often, people don't know what is the exact answer or what's the best answer to give, so their own interpretation is now at play. And because people click through these images fairly quickly, there's not much time left to actually think about the best response. So this then allows HERO to circumvent biased answers, and again, it takes maximum 5 minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. It's engaging, it's fun, because it is picture-based. So what's the ultimate aim of HERO? It aims to uncover possible areas of what we call frictions in organizations that need further work and intervention. So it literally is like the warning signal in a car when the oil is running down. It gives organizations a light. You need to, something is not working well, you need to look at this and you need to find out what it is that needs further work and fix it, basically, fill up the oil again in that sense. It measures how individuals perceive the organization, how they feel within the company, and this ultimately then defines their well-being and their engagement. So when people feel well, obviously they are much more engaged and motivated to contribute to the organization to work well. Companies can stratify these results to identify these potential problems that exist in different departments across the whole organization according to gender or age, different levels of the hierarchy, and any other criteria that our clients want to look into, really. So it's very flexible in the sense it can be set up in a flexible manner and analyzed according to our clients' wishes. So what exactly is it that HERO measures and that you can be sure of that it actually measures employee engagement and well-being? It measures 5 different dimensions, of which one, or the first one, is job demand. So job demand is looking at how much pressure are employees experiencing at their work. Are they overloaded with work, which increases stress and then has an impact on their well-being and engagement? Is there a balance between work and life? Is the demand adequate? Do people and employees feel in control? The second one is job control. How autonomous are employees? Do they have some sort of flexibility, or are there too many regulations and processes that can impact employees' engagement negatively? Do employees have some sort of control, and are employees empowered by, for example, what Jill said, the leadership team, the senior leadership team? Then it looks at relationships. So it looks at are employees working in a competitive environment, which sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes, however, it can result in negative engagement. Do employees work in isolation? That can be positive or negative. And how do colleagues and managers manage conflict and difficult situations that then also have a positive or negative impact on relations? The fourth dimension that HERO looks into is the support. support meaning both in terms of the resources that employees are getting from the company in order to perform their jobs well. So if, for example, the printer or whatever is not really working all the time, the diary set up on the calendar, then obviously this impacts performance and engagement, but also the more the feedback and the constructive feedback, most of all, support that they get by peers and managers. So it's a technical thing, but obviously also a human support. And finally, the dimension of job role. So it looks at do employees know their responsibility? Is the role clearly defined? Is everyone aware of their roles? So there's no crossing between role borders in that sense. So people are not taking over some tasks that actually belong to others, and that creates a whole, not a nice environment. So these 5 dimensions have been tested in research and have been proven to contribute to employee well-being and ultimately employee engagement, and that's what HERO is looking into. These 5 dimensions are all represented within the pictures that you're using. To show you an output example of an overview of the, one of our clients, it was a global pharmaceutical organization, and they had the problem that their staff was extremely stressed, very dissatisfied. There was a lot of employees who took days of sick and a high employee churn. And what you can see here, so we ran HERO, and they wanted to identify what actually is it that causes this stuff, stress and dissatisfaction and employees running away. And you can see a spider web diagram that portrays a blue spider web and the, which represents non-conscious responses, and a yellow spider web which represents the conscious responses. So the closer the web is to the outside of the diagram, the more relevant and most important these dimensions are. So we can see here that consciously people said it is the relationships, it's the relationships to colleagues and managers who were responsible or are responsible, why I'm so stressed, why I'm dissatisfied. However, when we ran HERO and we were looking at the non-conscious responses, as you can see here, it actually wasn't the relationships that much. It was all the other dimensions that highly impacted the employee engagement. So it wasn't, the roles weren't very clear. There was a lot of crossing lines between the roles. The job support wasn't very good, especially from the managers. It wasn't very clearly communicated. Very often job demand was extremely high and staff was overloaded with work, and job control, which is common in the pharma industry. There are lots of regulations and processes, but that doesn't mean that you need to have that also within your organization. So you can see from this output how wrong you can go if you rely on people's conscious responses and just focus your whole strategy on what people tell you. So in this instance, they would have looked into relationships and have forgotten all the other dimensions. So that's what HERO does, and that's an overview of what you get in order to look into what to do next.
And in terms of when we work with clients post-HERO, what we can do is, it entirely depends on the results or the spider diagram that you have for your organization or department or team, so it's entirely scalable. But from there we can build communications campaign, or go deeper into the business psychology and run focus groups depending on what it uncovers, and also look at how to support the HR team, so whether it's a big change that you're going through, a merger, acquisition, or perhaps new leadership. So I'm going to hand back to Philip for any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Siobhan, and thank you, Jill, and thank you, Katharina. I can see that some questions are flooding in, but we will have some time to answer a few more. So if you haven't sent your question in yet, please do send it in. One thing, though, before we get to participants' questions, is a question for you, Katharina, which is about the sort of spider diagram you showed and how HERO works. You were talking about Hero and saying that its big advantage is it shows the non-conscious and what people are really feeling and what's affecting them rather than what they say is affecting them. Does that mean that you can run it in isolation and still get an idea of what's happening in the conscious, what they're saying? Or do you rely on, for instance, when you came up with that anonymous global pharmaceutical organization, was that based on what they'd already contributed in other surveys and so on?
No, so what Hero does, it measures both. It measures employees' conscious and non-conscious reactions. So it is set up, we are able to measure in the background which of the responses are conscious and which are non-conscious. So the output that I have shown is solely based on the responses that we got from Hero.
Okay, great, thank you. And I must say, actually, it begs the question because, of course, your example about the pharmaceutical organisation is in the healthcare sector. Siobhan, you talked about all the different sectors that Portland operates in, and clearly engagement is an issue in all sorts of industries and sectors. But where is it really difficult to keep employees engaged? Where do these sort of issues arise the most?
I think it's less about the sector, so it's not as easy as saying if you have a disparate workforce, that's the problem. I think there's so many factors involved. It's less about the tools that you use to communicate with people. It's much more the basics of communications in terms of having clear messaging and having a clear strategy and having the same message that's shared across the organisation. So whether that's around vision or business focus, I think, again, rather than sector, it's about looking at what's the model of the business. Is it 2 or 3 businesses that have come together? Are there different cultures? What are the objectives? What's the buy-in? And I think going back to what Jill said, particularly about engagement at Portland, but some of the clients that we have the most success with is where there's true buy-in to engagement from the top and across the board. I think where it tends to fall down from our experience is middle management, and I think largely that's because they end up doing so much of the day job, no matter what sector you're in, and also taking on a lot of leadership responsibility. And hopefully it will kind of ring true to anyone on the phone that to have real success with employee engagement, it needs a commitment from people, but also timescale wise, to have cultural change or to really make a difference. You're not going to make a difference by Christmas. It could be 6 months, 12 months down the line until you turn big companies around, small companies, or even teams. So I think it requires more commitment than traditional PR, because you can land a story between now and Christmas, but you can't change employees' engagement overnight.
It's a longer-term process.
Mm-hmm.
You've touched clearly, very carefully, on some of the issues that some of the questions that have come in from the audience on the webinar are about. And instead of looking at sectors, this first one's about scale. So Siobhan, I'll start with you on this one. A lot of your solutions seem to apply better to large corporations, and this has been sent in. Are there any specific recommendations you have for smaller firms, say up to 30 people, to help them manage engagement?
I think, again, so am I allowed to say who's asked the question?
I don't think you should.
No problem. I won't do then. So I think the principles are the same. I think the smaller the team, the more control you have over the message. So whilst we've spoken about coordinating the message and not controlling, I think the key is to be honest with your staff and as transparent as you can be. I think the last thing anybody wants is to either read about something in the media or hear about it from a friend, or again, if you're a small team of 30 people, to hear about it from another team. And I think no matter what size the organisation or the client or team, it's about a drumbeat of communication and also two-way communication. So there needs to be a facility for feedback, and that can be formal or informal. There's little point in having an email inbox for feedback if nobody ever reads it, or there's little point in having any sort of survey if there's no response from it. So I think it's, that works on any scale. And I think we have to be realistic. Some of the things we've spoken about where it may be large corporates, every large corporate breaks down into different divisions, which breaks down into subdivisions. So essentially you end up working with 10, 20, 30 people at any level.
So you're always thinking about manageable size. We've got a question also about the size of the organisations who use the HERO tool. Katharina, shall I come to you with this question? And that is, again, it's been sent in. It says, what is the average size of an organisation that uses the HERO tool? And I guess my supplement to that would be, is there an ideal size? Is it for any size organisation?
Yes, it can be used for any size of organization. It can be sent out to as many employees as the client wants to, so just to specific departments, to the whole organization, so the organization can actually get an overview of what's going on in the whole organization, then breaking down into different departments, even teams, so it doesn't have a limit.
Great. Okay. We've got a question about values, and Jill, I think in your presentation you were talking about values. The question that's come in here is, what's the relationship between internal engagement and values, particularly when the values piece is sometimes by necessity top down?
So the relationship is essentially, for us is it's essentially defines us as a business. So we went through quite a big exercise which involved all of our employees to establish what our values were. So it wasn't a kind of a top-down exercise. And what it's given our employees is a sense of what does Portland stand for? What am I part of? How does this? And we did an education piece around how it links to the wider business strategy, so they could see how it all pieces together. And we had workshops where we rolled out a values workshop across the entire business. And some of the feedback we got from people is, this is fantastic in terms of clarity. I now know what Portland value. This is really important in terms of my own career development. And I can see the sorts of things I need to do to show that I'm ready for promotion, or to show that, I can work best in another team, or, this is great externally in terms of our employer brand. This is great in terms of our relationships with clients or prospects. So actually, it's been a real great tool for engagement purposes. Siobhan, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes. So I think in terms of clients and values, I think again it's the longevity piece and commitment. So you can't be changing your values every time there's a new CEO, because that's what he wants to do and he wants to roll it out as part of a strategy thing, which is an argument we've probably all had, but I think we need to try and guard against that. The only way which values become truly embedded is if they have longevity, but also people need to live them day to day. It needs to not be a poster on the wall, or it needs to not be part of your induction and then you never hear about it again. And I think that can be done through different ways. As Jill's spoken about, at Portland we do it. If it's part of your review process, if it's part of the way that you talk about culture, it becomes genuinely embedded, and engagement is another part of that. I think it needs to, for engagement and values to work, it needs to not be a set piece where people feel they're being engaged on the values of a company. Again, no matter how big or small, it's an incredibly cynical audience, and people will see right through it if it's a new set of values since the last one 2 years ago.
And you both seem to say that it also means involving your audience or employees right from the beginning, and making it, even if it does feel a bit top-down, making sure that it isn't really top-down, that there is a down-top approach as well. Okay, thank you. We've got a question about global. So I'm looking at all three of you as to who wants to take this one first. But the question is, thank you for the interesting webinar. You mentioned that you asked your employees how to integrate your global employees. I'd be interested to know what kind of ideas they came up with. What are your best practices for engaging your global employees? Jill, I can see you nodding.
Yes, absolutely. I don't have all the answers, Philip. I will say that as a business, I will be honest, and I think it's a challenge that we continue to face as we grow. And some of the ideas we've had and we have implemented are things like secondments. So we often have people from London seconded to our global offices, and we offer quite a competitive package to do so. So we might pay for accommodation and offer sort of overseas packages. And we also invite people to London. We also, on a more informal basis, we have people over for training. So where we've got big training programs happening in London, we'll often invite our overseas officers to come over, and if they can't, we will make sure that the training is at a time where we can dial people in. So technology has an important role to play in making sure that they feel that they're integrated. Another thing that we've recently offered is a program where we've said that if people are going to be, so one of our offices is in New York, for example, and one of the things we said is if you're going to New York anyway on holiday and you'd like to visit our New York office, then we'll pay for your accommodation. So, you can go and sit with your colleagues, see what it's like to work in the office overseas. So we basically incentivize people to be truly, to be truly one Portland, which happens to be one of our values. So, so those are just a couple of examples of how we do that.
Okay, and Siobhan?
Yeah, so we work with clients who have globally dispersed workforces, some of whom are based in offices, some are based in factories, and the way that I would advise them to communicate globally is kind of two ways. There's the practical side in terms of tools, so we develop apps and work with companies to have that. So again, thinking about the line between your professional and private life having blended, it might be easier if you're not based in an office to catch up with company news on an app, and also to try and showcase different elements of the business or global elements within communications. And again, that doesn't need to be a set piece, but I think if leadership are telling stories or talking about the way the business is going, to bring in different parts of the world really helps to bring it to life. And in terms of practically, I think if there are big campaigns or if there are set pieces in the calendar, it's about having a core strategy, a central strategy, and then letting local teams tailor it. So if you've got the luxury of having a team based in Singapore, by all means tell them what the objective is, but let them do it their own way, so that they feel part of the big organisation, but not kind of people from London dictating what you should do.
So don't make it too templated, allow a bit of autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great question here about Hero itself, and I'm looking at Katharina or Siobhan to answer this. I think it's Katharina from the expression on Siobhan's face. The question is, do you sell Hero as a standalone product? Would you work with other agencies who are working with a client on a change comms issue?
So Hero has been developed in partnership with Portland, so it is exclusively deployed by Portland Communications. So yeah, my short answer would be unfortunately not.
Okay. I like the short answer because we've only got a few minutes left. That said, we have time. If you've got a burning question you still haven't asked us, please do submit it in. So the next question is all about engaging and attracting new talent.
Mm-hmm.
So Jill, maybe I'll address this to you first.
Okay.
In terms of engaging and attracting new talent, how do you communicate a company's culture in a way that cuts through for people who aren't yet involved or bought in? As an employer brand, how do you avoid merely contributing to the noise in a competitive jobs market? That sounds like someone who may have heard a bit of that noise, but yes, how do you avoid merely contributing to the noise?
Sure. Okay, so I think one of the points that Siobhan mentioned earlier about sort of recommendations, so people who currently work in the business, sort of talking to their friends, family, so we have a very generous sort of referral scheme which many businesses have, and I think that is first-hand, you hearing from someone who's in the organisation who can give you that experience, cutting through warts and all, cutting through all the sort of spin around it. You know, another thing is through our social media, we attract a lot of millennials, and you know, it's becoming more and more important to sort of set ourselves apart from our competitors in terms of, you know, what's unique to us, things that you wouldn't necessarily get in other organisations. So we do that through giving people a sense of our culture through our LinkedIn careers page, for example. We're just in the process of developing a specific page on our website which will give you a real feel of what it's like to work in Portland. There'll be a video, there'll be, you know, testimonials from staff and other things. You know, another thing we're looking at as well is kind of getting ourselves out there. So we're going to be attending sort of careers fairs. We do talks at universities, so a lot of our leaders go to universities and talk about what we do and what it would be like to work in PR. So a lot of it is around kind of just getting our name out there, whether it be social media or people doing talks and things. So it's a challenge.
Sure it is, but it does sound also like this is an extension of what you're doing internally. So when you talk about things like, for instance, having culture ambassadors,
yes.
And you're talking about having values as well, clearly if you have those identified internally, it's a lot easier to talk about them externally as well and have more people who are engaged that way. Excellent, thank you. Siobhan.
Yes, sorry, I just had a last point for anyone who's still with us. The final slide actually has a test link URL so that you can have a go with Hero after the call and fill it in for yourself. This is a pilot version of it, so a light version, but you'll get an idea of basically where you are on the 5 measures that Katharina spoke about.
Excellent. Well, I can tell from the screen that there are plenty of people still with us, and thank you for staying with us. We're going to finish with one more question. Katharina, I'm going to address this question to you because although we've been looking at engagement across a load of different sectors, and for instance, one of the anonymous example you showed was about the pharmaceutical sector, I'm curious, and I think everyone listening in will be curious about how PR stands up as an employer, as an industry, and particularly in terms of the engagement of its employees. Is it an audience that's easier to engage in some ways than other sectors in your experience? And what are the sort of issues?
I think it's, I wouldn't be able to really generalize here and to give a clear answer.
That's a shame.
Because no matter if it's PR agencies or other companies, it's making sure that these 5 dimensions that Hero are measuring are balanced and are dealt with. And if this is in a positive area, then I would say organizations have achieved to engage employees from that side. So there are PR agencies that are really good with this, but I have experienced others which are not. So
that's right. So I'll put that in a very sort of positive way, and that you're saying really that any PR agency or employer in this space can transcend the category as well. They can be good at in those 5 areas, and therefore don't have to be identified as part of the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. But before we go, I do want to say obviously a very big thank you to our guests, to Jill, to Siobhan, to Katharina for joining us today and sharing their thoughts and engagement and the battle for talent. Thank you. I also want to thank everyone listening in to the webinar on engagement today. Dare I say it, that I hope you found the content engaging. Obviously, we'll make sure that there's a recording of the webinar available, and thank you everyone for sending in your questions. Do keep an eye out for our next webinar. As part of Amex Measurement Month in September, we'll be looking at how measurement works, and we'll be looking at its new interactive framework. That takes place on Tuesday, September the 6th. All the details, as ever, of Gorkana's webinars and its events are available at gorkana.com. I hope you'll be able to join us soon. See you soon. The webinar is now over.